When do you actually want to stop trading your time for money and start living fully on your own terms? Hi, I'm Justin Buonomo, and this is Wisdom is Wealth. Wisdom is Wealth is designed to give you guys practical insights, modern strategies, and even timeless philosophies around gaining wisdom in your life. The wiser we get, the wealthier we will become. This podcast really is inspired by the book of Proverbs in the Bible, which was written by King Solomon, who prayed to God for wisdom and as a byproduct became the wealthiest person to ever live. If he was still alive today in present day, he'd be worth $1.3 trillion with a T. Not because he prayed for wealth, but he prayed to God to give him wisdom. And as he grew wiser, as a byproduct, he grew wealthier, particularly financially, but not just stopping there, in every facet of his life. And in my own life, I have realized that the wealthier I become, it's truthfully just because I have become wiser in life. I'm gonna bring on guests that are incredibly successful, incredibly amazing human beings, and have an amazing financial wealth that they've grown for themselves. And they're gonna share wisdom on their life experience in totality in hopes that something becomes valuable for you to implement in your process, in your life, and in your journey, and see how wisdom truthfully is wealth. Welcome back to another episode of Wisdom is Wealth. Today's episode title is called 2 Questions That Will Change How You Think About Money Forever. And so we're gonna do something a little bit different today. No frameworks necessarily, no step-by-step systems, no debt payoff strategies today. But today instead, I want this to be a little bit more reflective, if you will. And I'm just gonna spend time with 2 questions with you guys today. 2 questions that I believe will genuinely change the way you think about money, about work, and about financial freedom and what it actually means for your life. And if you've been following along with anything that I've been doing, you know already that something big is coming on Monday, June 15th, which I'm extremely excited for. Just got done prepping and praying for, and we'll talk about that at the end. But first, we want to get into these 2 very important questions. And so the first question that I want you guys to spend some time with. This is going to be your homework, these 2 questions. And obviously we're going to spend some time with them on this episode. I'm going to break them down a little bit about what they mean, how I've experienced them, and maybe how we can ponder and pray through them. And so the first question is, what do you want your life to look like? And most people, I believe, really have never actually stopped to answer this question. Maybe a little bit, but not deeply, not honestly. We get so caught up in trying to survive financially, like trying to pay down the debt, trying to make the budget work, trying to get ahead, that we never really actually stop and ask ourselves, what have we actually been getting ahead towards? Or what do we actually want our life to look like? If 2 years passed, 3 years passed, 5 years passed, 10 years passed, what do we want that actual present state to look like, to feel like, to have everyone around us experiencing? And so I want you to pause right now, wherever you are. All right, if you're driving, obviously keep your eyes open. Right, keep your eyes on the road, but keep your ears open, keep your heart open, keep your mind open, right? And so, again, whether you're driving, you're working out, you're doing dishes, whatever, I want you to actually think about this. What do you want your life to look like? Not your bank account, your life. Because here is the picture I grew up with of what wealthy looked like. I think you might have, if you guys have been following along for a while and have listened to other episodes, I always describe when I was growing up, the wealthy dad in movies was always working. He was 60 to 70 hours a week, obsessed with his job, neglecting his family, and even at times sleeping at his office. His whole identity was just wrapped up in his profession and his pursuit for wealth. And you see it all the time in these movies in many different iterations where he pulls up to the kids' soccer game, and when they're already cleaning up the field and oh no, I did it again, missed another soccer game because of work, and beating his head on the steering wheel and just already reciting his empty promises on the drive home to talk to his wife and his children. And he gets home and the wife is frustrated, the kids up in their room with the door closed, not wanting to talk, and there's just empty promises about how it won't happen again, just for it to happen again probably 2 weeks later. And everyone around him looks at his success and says, wow, he's doing really well, right? But as I think through that, I'm that's just not the life that I want. I want to be truly wealthy, right? Not what they depict in the movies and the material wealth, or maybe what society has made us think wealthy looks like. There are other options, and it's possible to not only pursue those, but to accomplish those. And my version of wealth is I want to be around, present at every soccer game, if not coaching the teams that my kids are on, taking my kids to school in the morning, picking them up in the afternoon, teaching them about Jesus every day, fully present on vacations and fully present on them Sunday morning cartoon sessions that my kids are really, really growing to love. And I want to look at my wife, Lauren, and know that she knows she has all of me, not the leftovers after work takes everything else. That to me is truly wealthy, not a number, a life. And so what about you? I want you to actually answer this for yourself. And it's crazy, as soon as I just said that, what about you? I got chills, right? But I want you to actually answer this for yourself. What does the life you are building towards actually look like? What do you want your life to actually look like? And a lot of times in my sessions, in the programs that I run, specifically the Good Steward program, some days I don't really show up with like a specific lesson plan per se. I show up with a whole list of reflection questions. And even if I do have a lesson planned out, almost every single one of them these days is ending with reflection questions where I either give them to them as homework, or we actually sit there and I give them 3 to 5 minutes per question to sit there and reflect, journal, and pray on. And so this is powerful if we take the time to reflect. I'm sure some people already have your wheels turning, your heart stirring, right? Your emotions hopefully, fly into a good area here, or at least inspiring you to actually sit with this question, not the half-baked answer we maybe have in our head, not sitting and thinking that we're not deserving of the answer that we truthfully want to fulfill this question with, but instead really spending time and allowing yourself to be with that, feel that, and imagine and experience what this outcome of life would look like for you. And so, what does a Tuesday look like when you've made it? Where are you? Who are you with? What are you doing? And what are you not doing? Because the answer matters a lot. And we are going to come back to this here in a few minutes. So my first question to you is, what do you want your life to look like? I try to explain it a few different ways, give you my example, give you what I don't want my life to look like. And this just takes time to reflect. And so I truthfully just want to, I'll use the word challenge you all to make this a priority, whether it's as soon as you hang up here on this call, or I just almost said this call like I'm teaching live, as soon as you end this podcast, right? Or is it tomorrow? Is it the next day on your prayer walk, right? Really truthfully prioritize this and even schedule it in. As we move on to question number 2 here, all right? So second question, when do you want to retire? And I don't mean the conventional answer that you've been fed by society, right? I do not mean whenever the 401k says you can. I don't mean 65 because that's what everyone else does. If that's what you want to do, by the way, to each their own, no judgment whatsoever. But is that your actual answer, or was that the answer that was fed to you that you only believe is possible and that it's the only option that you think is possible? Because here is where this question got real for me personally, right? And first off, I mean, when do you actually want to stop trading your time for money and start living fully on your own terms? After I asked myself that iteration of this question, that's when it got really real for me personally. And then I remember specifically where I was, and some of y'all might know this story, but I want to share it again because it's so applicable to not only this episode in totality, but to specifically give you guys an example again for this question. Kind of like my example for the other question was like the wealthy dad example in movies. That's what I didn't want and what I want my life to actually look like. And this will be again another explanation or breakdown or personal example of my answer to this question to help you guys ponder and pray and come up with yours. And so it was March 2020, right before the world shut down for COVID, and Lauren and I were in Hawaii on the north shore of Oahu, staying at this beautiful condo right on the beach. And there's no private beaches in Hawaii, but this one might as well have been because I was the only one out there every single day. It was very secluded, and I think we had been there for a couple of days now, and it was a random Tuesday morning about 9 a.m. and I was swimming in the ocean by myself, no one else out there, just me in the water. And I came out of the ocean soaking wet, and I don't even even know what came over me, because I genuinely, I don't know if you guys are the same, but I hate the feeling of sand on my wet skin. Oh man, I think it's growing on me a little bit because it means I'm at the beach and having a good time and on vacation. But anyways, at this moment, I was not very fond of it, but I just walked straight out of the water and laid down in the sand, face up toward the sky, completely soaking wet and no towel. And I just said out loud, I have to figure out how to make this my everyday life, this freedom, this presence, this peace. And so I went inside and I called my financial advisor, Nate. I'm soaking wet, no towel still, sat down in the chair, pulled up on my laptop, called him. I don't even think I said hello to him. And I just asked him, Nate, when can I retire? And he is just so kind and so patient. And he's such a great teacher and just an amazing human and financial advisor. And so he ran some numbers and came back excited for what he had for me. And he said, great news, man, 56, almost 10 years earlier than the average retirement age. And while I was grateful for his service and his optimism, and I get what he was saying and doing here, that was not great news to me at all. Right? I was 26 years old at the time. That meant 30 more years of going to a day job I did not love, barely liked, living for a short 2-day weekend, working 50 hours a week and getting looked at sideways if I take a week vacation. I couldn't do it. And I'm not trying to be ungrateful or disrespectful in anybody else's situation, but for me, that just didn't feel right. I didn't feel like that's what God was calling me to do, to how to spend my life, particularly the next 30 years. And so I went on like a complete rampage figuring out what my options were, because there had to be other options. And mind you, at this time, I was making 6 figures as a 26-year-old working in Johns Hopkins Medicine, running the hospitals from a business standpoint. And all I was going to do was just keep climbing that ladder and probably be a very young vice president making multiple 6 figures a year. And that was still going to be my outcome. Pretty decent job, good pay, but still 30 years from that present day. I was like, man, this can't be my only option. Even though it does sound like a pretty decent one for most people, it just did not feel right. And I think that was the Holy Spirit speaking to me that it wasn't right for me, and that to ultimately get educated on what my options were, so then I can pray over those and then pick the door that the Lord was actually calling me through. And so I knew that there had to be a better way to build towards that Tuesday morning in Hawaii becoming my normal, not my vacation. And so that search changed everything. And so again, I want you to answer this for yourself. When do you actually want to retire? What age? What does that even look like for you? Write it down if you can, or just sit with it for a second. And so to kind of finish my story, at the time I was 26 and I said 35. I was like, I want to retire by the time I'm 35. That's 9 years from now. If I put the work in to figure out what my options are, pick the best options, stay connected to the Lord as best as I possibly can so I can hear from Him, even though, side note, well, not always the most successful at that part, but thank God for His mercy, His grace, and His patience, and His unconditional love that is always pulling me back, bringing me back to Him, and ultimately allowing me to use my hardships and my struggles and my mistakes, all ultimately for His glory through His sovereignty. And so I said 35, and I started this business, or my business, JFF, or Journey to Financial Freedom, around, I think it was like a year later, basically, after I did a bunch of research on what my best options would be. And so that was my answer. And so I educated myself on what the options were after I spent time with the Lord to get that answer. And then after I educated myself on what the options were, and also what the Lord actually says about building wealth, then I just took a hard pursuit towards what I believe the Lord told me my best option was. And so these two answers to these questions together, what you want for your life to look like, and when do you want to get there by, or when do you want to retire by, right? This is the foundation of everything when it comes to building wealth intentionally. And that's what I'm getting at here. And so now here is what most people do after they answer these two questions. Nothing, unfortunately. Nothing. Because they do not know what to do next. And honestly, that is not their fault, because nobody is teaching this. Most of the conversations in the Christian space are around money. Stops at what not to do. Do not love money. Do not be greedy. Do not make wealth your idol. And all of those are true, and all of those are important. And we really need to fully understand and embody those. But what about what God says you should actually do with money, because there is a biblical blueprint for building wealth, for growing your income, for investing wisely, and most Christians have never seen it. So let me give you a quick preview of what that blueprint looks like. And I mean quick here, we're not going to go too in depth here, because I'm teaching this in depth on June 15th, and I do not want to give away the whole thing here, because I think it'll be much better taught at this live event that I'm having, which is virtual via Zoom, called the Income and Investments Workshop, where we're going to be going over the blueprint for building wealth through growing your income and your investments in a way that glorifies God. But here's two pieces to it that are very, very important. Piece number one, again, what does God actually say about wealth? First, you need the right foundation, the right theology around wealth, because you cannot build something confidently if you secretly believe God is against it. How true is that? You cannot build something confidently if you secretly and wrongly believe God is against it. And a lot of Christians carry that guilt, that tension, that feeling that wanting to build wealth somehow conflicts with their faith. And let me just give you one verse here, right? Deuteronomy 8:18. God says he gives us the ability to produce wealth, not just enough to survive, wealth. And the parable of the talents in Matthew 25 shows us that God does not just permit multiplication, he actually expects it. And God is not against your financial success. He is against you making money your God. These are two completely different things. And once that distinction clicks, I promise you everything changes. And so that's why we start there. And then piece number two, the more practical side of stuff, which is once the foundation is right, you now need the vehicle, something that actually gets you to the life that you described in question one by the timeline you set in question two. And there are really only three options. You got the stock market, real estate, and business. Each one gets you to financial freedom at a different speed. Each one requires a different level of involvement, and each one carries a different level of fulfillment depending on who you are and what God has wired you for. So there's no really one size fits all answer here. The right vehicle for you depends entirely on your answers to those two questions we started with. And after figuring out which one is right for you is honestly one of the most important financial decisions you will ever make, so you don't get halfway or almost fully through your life and be like, man, I did this wrong. Right? Maybe I knew the answers to those questions that Justin gave me on the Wisdom is Wealth episode, but I never did anything about it. And how you do something about it is getting clear on what God actually says about wealth and getting clear on the vehicles that actually can provide you the financial freedom and the capacity and the timeline that you believe the Lord is calling you to through the answers to those questions that I posed to you through this episode. And so here's the deal. On Monday, June 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be hosting the Income and Investments Workshop. 2 hours live on Zoom, and we're going to go deep on both of those pieces, the theology, what does God actually say about wealth, right? And then ultimately the vehicles as well. And so we're going to unpack what God actually says about building wealth straight from Scripture, and we're going to walk through all three financial freedom vehicles in detail. And I'm going to give you the framework to figure out which one actually fits the life you want and the timeline you want to get there. This is not prosperity gospel. This is not hustle culture with the Bible verse slapped on it. Never. This is a genuine, scripturally sound blueprint for growing your income and investments in a way that honors God. And the amazing part, it's only $7. Only reason why we charge for it is get you guys a little skin in the game so you actually show up, because the enemy wants to do anything that he can to first and foremost get you not to register. So let's fight through that doubt, those fears, those excuses that are popping up that even maybe sound like logic and wisdom. That's just creative deception. And then he also wants to do anything to get you to sign up and then not show up. Now you have the guilt for not showing up, the missed opportunity, and the missed breakthroughs that the Lord has for you. So we charge a little bit of money to get you guys to hopefully show up, and then we pray for you. As soon as we see that registration come through, I do my absolute best to stop in the moment and pray for you, not only to show up, but to ultimately allow that to be the next obedient step for God to ultimately continue to provide the financial breakthrough that you are praying for. But as I always say, God doesn't answer financial prayers with direct deposits. He answers them with opportunities. He asks us to walk obediently in, and I pray that you feel convicted that this is that next obedient step, and obviously the recording will be included as well for you to keep. And so if something stirred in you today when you answered these two questions, if you felt the gap between where you are and where you want to be, if something in you said, I need to figure this out, it's time. That is not an accident, friend. That is a nudge. That's called holy alignment. Nothing in the kingdom of God, it happens by coincidence or accident. And so the registration link for the workshop is going to be in the show notes. I would love to see you on June 15th. Invite your friends, right? Invite your family. Invite people that you think that would benefit from this, and send them this episode if you need to give them a little precursor, if you will, to convince them to show up. And until next time, remember, wisdom is not just about making money. It is about managing money in a way that honors God, creates peace, and builds lasting impact. And so that's exactly what we'll teach you not on continued Wisdom as Wealth episodes, but the Income Investments Workshop. Registration links in the bio. Go ahead and just make that easy next step. Click it, and we'll see you there. And this is how wisdom truthfully becomes wealth. So I love y'all. I hope this episode was great. The only CTA I'm gonna ask from you guys today, which is call to action, just to register for the Income and Investments Workshop. And if you need anything, just reach out. I love y'all, and I'll see you there.